Introduction. He didn't introduce me. Okay, first of all, I can't believe you're all here this early in the morning to hear me speak, and I'm absolutely delighted to see everybody. I want to thank Ernie for inviting me and asking me to talk about Touro. It's one of my very favorite things to talk about, and of course I want to thank Carla and her team for being gracious enough to host this event. I'm gonna talk a little personal and then mostly about Touro because I'm so intertwined with the university right now. I can't figure out truly where I stop and Touro starts. And again, let me also acknowledge Las Vegas Heels for their involvement today. And I think you have a happy hour tomorrow? Yes. Where is it? Oh, perfect. I'll see you there. See you there. After I lost the Senate race, I was absolutely heartbroken. And I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do with myself. What do you do when you love public service, but you don't have an office to serve the public with? So after my term in Congress was over and I came home in January, I sat down on the couch and I pretty much stayed on the couch for quite a while. The TV was not necessarily on, but I was staring at an empty screen, and I just emotionally, physically, mentally, I just had nothing left. And it takes a while to recover. It takes everything out of you. And so I received a number of offers and this was so strange to me. I'd get a phone call from someone and they'd say, I'll give you $20,000 if you can put me in touch or make an appointment with Jim Murren at the MGM, or do this or do that. And I just didn't, that was not how I envisioned my life. I didn't want to be a hired gun or a paid anything like that. And so I respectfully declined some totally ridiculous, outlandish offers. And then, like with anything else, time heals all wounds and you pick yourself up, you have to get on with life. And I received this very extraordinary offer from a major law firm in Las Vegas asking me to come on board. Now, I hadn't practiced law in 30 years, so I didn't think it was my legal expertise that they were interested in, which was none. But I realized I'm a working woman, I like being out, and I said, you know what, time to go back to work. And so I accepted their offer, but feeling very uncomfortable. It was like, been there, done that, don't want to do it anymore. So I got, at the beginning of November of 2013, I got this fortuitous phone call from somebody that I knew 20 years earlier that had given me a campaign contribution for my first congressional race and then moved his family to Israel. So I had no contact with him ever since then. But I got this call and it said, Shelley, this is David Rabb. I don't know if you remember me. Like all good politicians, I remember everybody that gave me a campaign contribution. So obviously, David, of course, are you still in Israel? No, I'm the executive vice president of Touro University. Do you know Touro? And I said, well, actually I do. I gave the commencement address a couple of years earlier at Touro, and so I knew pretty much about it. I also knew my predecessor, Mike Harder, who was married to Carol Harder, who was president of UNLV. And so I knew they were looking for a CEO. And he said to me, he said, you know, we're looking for a new CEO, and I'm thinking while he's talking to me that they want me to be on the search committee to select a new CEO. And I'm thinking, how can I do that? I'm taking a job in January with the new law firm and on and on. And then he said, he said, we're wondering if you'd be interested in the job. And I was kind of like, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. You know, what is that? And I said to him, David, I have absolutely no academic medical background whatsoever, and I don't think being married to a doctor qualifies you to run a medical school, although it never, it obviously does, but at that time I didn't think that it did. And so I said, well, that I can't. I have no experience, no expertise, no knowledge, and they said, well, we still like to talk to you. So I flew into New York that next week. They flew to Las Vegas, and I started thinking seriously about doing this. And the reason I did is because of the very fact that I had no experience. And I thought, at my stage in life, when do you get to write a new chapter in your life? I had no idea if I could do this. I thought for sure, I made sure with the law firm when I told them that they would still take me if I changed my mind. And so I accepted the job. I started at the beginning of January of 2014, and that was over 8 years ago. It has been an extraordinary experience, and it has broadened my horizons. I think it has really had a very positive impact on my life, and certainly the school, I think, has benefited from what little expertise I had in the field. And so that brings me to Touro University, what it is. Now, when I first took over, I thought it was the best kept secret in the state of Nevada. If you mentioned Touro University, I would say 99% of the people that you would say Touro University wouldn't have a clue of what it was, where it was, why it was. But I think we've come a tremendous way in the last 8.5 years. And let me tell you what it is. It is a nonprofit, private, Jewish-sponsored institution of higher learning. Now, it's Jewish-sponsored, but I have very few Jewish students there, but it's one of the most diverse student populations that I have ever seen. With all my years on the Board of Regents and other involvements with academia, I mean, we truly are a diverse and very inclusive institution of higher learning. I have on this, now I am the CEO and Senior Provost of the Western Division of Touro University. Prior to COVID, I spent half my week in Vallejo, California, which is in Northern California, as the CEO of the California Touro, which is very similar to the Nevada Touro in size and the programs that we have, with the exception that in California, we also have a school of pharmacy, which, like every other school in pharmacy in the entire country, is really suffering from lack of student interest and applications, but that's over there. I'm going to contain my comments and remarks about the remarkable institution here in Nevada. We are the largest medical school in the state of Nevada. We admit 180 students. Oh, thanks, Mom. And let me acknowledge the Pokroys. I've known them for as long as I can remember, and Neville and my husband, Dr. Larry Lerner, were partners for well over 30 years. I think you were the one that recruited him to come to Las Vegas. Oh, Esther was the one. Well, thank you. Thank you. You've given me a very nice life. I know. Oh, okay. Well, I'll talk about that in a minute. Anyway, so these are the programs that we have. I have about 1,600 students in the medical school. It's a DO school, Doctors of Osteopathic Medicine. I like the philosophy, as you probably know. My husband, Dr. Larry, is a kidney specialist. He's an MD. My stepdaughter, Stephanie Lerner, is a DO. She's a primary care physician. In our family, we do medicine. And that's how we make our livelihood in our lives. We were at 135 admissions, and we got permission from our accrediting body to go to 180. We are now, all 4 classes are full, and this past year we graduated 172 students. Of those, 99.4% matched. I'm very, very happy about that. That is a very high percentage. And of the 172, 55 of our students will be doing their residencies here in the state of Nevada, primarily in southern Nevada. And they will, according to national statistics, 70% of doctors end up practicing where they do their residency. So we are contributing to the future of healthcare in this community and this country. Say that again? What does match mean? For those that don't know what match means, after 4 years of medical school, you're still not practicing. You have 3 more years of a residency, graduate medical education. That's what it means. You have to continue your education for a minimum of 3 more years. One of the problems, and I'll talk about this in detail later on, one of the problems we have in the state of Nevada, as you know, we have a physician shortage bordering on a crisis. We probably would need tomorrow to hire 1,000 new doctors to be in line with the national average of doctors, patients per capita. We are nowhere near that, and one of the reasons is we don't have an adequate number of residency programs. And again, if 70% of doctors end up practicing where they do their residency, and they have to do their residencies in order to become practicing physicians, if they have to leave here, chances are if they don't have a tie to the community, they're not coming back to Nevada to practice. We are finding more and more local physicians interested in sending their kids to Touro University. Nothing makes me happier when a good acquaintance of mine calls up and says that their son or daughter has applied, and first question I ask, because we do have standards, and what was their MCAT score, and if they give me I don't know if it's good enough, it's 512. Oh my God, that's great. Okay, so it makes me very, very happy when I hear these things. We do not make exceptions. You have got to. This past year, we had 4,200 applications for 180 slots in the med school. 4,200. You have got to be very qualified, very driven, and very ready to come into the program in order to be accepted at Touro. And we have the luxury of so many numbers that we can be very, very selective of who we admit. If we, oh, hi Kelly. If we admit you, we expect you to graduate 4 years later, and we do everything we can to make sure that that happens. Very, very diverse student population, as I mentioned before. When I went to law school 100 years ago, there were 20 of us in a class of 280. Actually, that's how I met my first husband, Fred Berkley, because all the second and third year law students came to freshman orientation to see what we looked like. And so consequently, I met him on orientation night. That is completely upside down now. I have a majority of women students at Touro, a large percentage of Asian students. We are always recruiting minority students. And as I said, even though it's a Jewish-sponsored institution, very few Jews are at the school, about maybe 20% of the student population. In addition to the DO program, we have, one other thing. 55 of our students matched locally. And I want to emphasize that because that is almost as large as UNLV's class. So we are really doing everything we can to encourage people to stay here. If we had more residency programs, we'd have more future doctors staying here. Right now, all of the programs, we don't have a medical school student shortage in this state. We have a doctor shortage in this state. UNLV is graduating 60. We're graduating 180. UNR is hovering a few over 60. So we're graduating a good number of students, but if they can't find residencies, they're leaving. And that is the major problem why we are not where we need to be when it comes to a number of doctors per patient. We have a PA program. Physician assistants, arguably the most sought after profession right now in healthcare. We were at 60. We got permission from our accrediting body to go to 80. So we are now graduating 80 physician assistants every year. Now, I can promise you that every one of my PAs has multiple job offers before they leave. And I am always fielding phone calls from medical offices around the community. How can we get one of your PAs? Or how do I want a PA? I said, well, most of them, they're scholarshiped. They're working, they have multiple job offers, and unless you're going to offer them a very generous package, chances are someone else already has. And so they're very sought after, and it's a really fabulous program. We have a physical therapy doctorate. We admit 40 students a year. We're contemplating going to our accrediting body and asking for an increase in our physical therapy students that we could admit. We went recently from a master's to a doctorate in our occupational therapy program. So we admit and we graduate 36 future occupational therapists every year. And again, it's a doctorate level. It added an extra year to the program. We are anticipating that the occupational therapist accrediting body is going to start insisting that all practicing occupational therapists in the country have a doctorate. And so we thought we'd get ahead of the curve on that. I can tell you that that is also an extremely sought after profession. There are not enough occupational therapists in the state, and that might be a national problem as well. We have our nurse practitioner program. We work very closely with the hospitals. Our first partnership was with Valley, where they pay for their nurses to come to Touro for advanced degrees. With the scope of practice for nurses expanding as it has, the extra training is very important. We provide that extra training, and hospitals like Valley are paying for their nurses to come to school. Now, needless to say, during the pandemic, everything changed dramatically, and I want to talk about that as well. We closed down, same as everybody else, in March of 2019. It feels like 2019. As I was walking out the door at noon, I was sure I was going to be back in a couple of weeks. We finally opened our doors on February 28th of this year. We had a couple of false starts. Back in December, I was planning to open after New Year's. The students are clamoring for it. We went immediately to virtual learning. The transition was as smooth as it could possibly be under the circumstances. I got permission from the governor's office to allow our students on campus for labs. Cadavers don't dissect themselves, I've discovered. And if any of my cadavers dissect themselves, they have to go back because they're not ready. They're not Touro material. The med school, we're accredited as a university, but each one of our programs is also accredited. So we had to get permission from each of our program accrediting bodies to, what are we doing? What can we do? Our accrediting body for the med school, it was March. They said, graduate them, get them out. We need them. Not the others. And they insisted that we had to complete all of the labs before my students can graduate. Got permission from the governor's office, and they came in, inspected. We could have 10 in a room, social distancing, PPE, temperature checks, but I can say very, very proudly we graduated every single student on time, and they were able to go out in the workforce and start working during a time that we needed every healthcare provider that we could possibly find in the state. We did it. We also have a Master of Health Science program. It's a one-year intensive science-based program. And why did we create that? Because when I first got to Touro, we had a lot of veterans applying for either the med school or the PA program. They were medics in the field in Afghanistan and Iraq. They could practice medicine with the best of them. They didn't have the science background in order to get admitted into a professional school. We started with 30 students. We went up to 60 students admitted because there was such a demand. Many of my students do their one-year science SEEPT program, and then they apply for our PA program or our DO program. A larger percentage of our students are now coming from our Master of Health Science program. We also have a partnership with the, not the school district, but the university system if they have a science program at their institution, they do, and let's say it's a 4-year institution, they can do 2-3 years at their institution, come to Touro, take their final year with us in our Master of Health Science program, and they are eligible, if they are in the top 20%, eligible for an interview to be admitted into one of the programs that's helping us with our minority recruitment. And that is very, very important. All of the accrediting bodies are stressing. It's part of what they look at. What are you doing? What are you doing for inclusion? What are you doing to attract minority students? We work very, very hard throughout the year to find scholarship money so that we can scholarship these students, because if you are, candidly, if you're an African American with very high grades and are applying for med school, you are going to be in great demand across the country. And Touro could not compete with full scholarships, half scholarships, so we have been able to encourage and entice a number of people in this community to adopt an incoming student and supplement their tuition for the complete 4 years that they're at Touro. That has helped us tremendously in the Hispanic community and the African American community, and we're very, very proud of that. In addition to the academic programs, we have an autism center. Prior to the pandemic, we saw 535 patient visits a month. It was a very, very busy place. Then, of course, we had to shut down. Now we are reopened and we are attracting students thanks to a $3 million grant from the government of Qatar. We are now able to offer our services at no charge to any youngster that has no insurance, can't afford it. We will never turn anybody away, and that additional $3 million has helped us tremendously with being able to relieve the anxiety that so many families have. Early intervention is very important when it comes to autism. We take youngsters as young as 18 years old. They age out at 12, and we're doing everything we can to expand the older youngsters population. It's difficult at our facility because it's geared to little ones. They have little chairs and little toilets and things like that, but that's a tremendous need in this community that we're hoping to work with Qatar in order to satisfy in the future. We have a medical clinic on campus. Prior to the pandemic, we were seeing 2,000 patient visits a month. We are not anywhere near that right now, but we're working to increase to get back our patients. We did a lot of telemedicine during the pandemic, and we are looking forward to ramping back up to 2,000 patient visits a year. We received a grant from United Healthcare for $2.6 million to provide prenatal care to indigent women in this community. I cannot tell you how many women. We are 49th in the United States in providing prenatal care to women, period. There is a tremendous need for this. What happens is they get no care at all, and they end up in the emergency room in order to deliver their babies. And generally speaking, these babies have a lot of problem, low weight, everything else that is connected with living on the streets. And that's population that we're dealing with here. Touro is going to start providing these services in the very near future, now that we have the grant, and I think that's very, very important. We have 3 mobile clinics. When I first got to Touro, I sat down with all the directors and I said, what is it that I can do to help right now, this very second? And one of them, the director of the PA program, said, oh, we could use a mobile clinic because we like to send our students down on the streets and take care of people that have no access to health care whatsoever. Walked out of the meeting, I said, why do I ask those questions? How am I going to find a mobile clinic? So as it turns out, the next day I'm at the container park having lunch with, may he rest in peace, Tony Shea. And I look across and I see a bunch of Airstream trailers. And I said, oh, Tony, I need one of those. And he looked at me, he said, they're $90,000. I can't give you one of those. I said, oh, I explained what I wanted. He said, look, he said, if you find one that you like, I'll pay for it. Okay. So I called my old friend that I went to high school with, or college with, Cliff Finley. And I said, Cliff, I know it's been 40 years since we last spoke, but I'm so happy to hear your voice now. I told him what I needed. He said, come on down to the RV park and pick one out. Oh, okay. So I went down, found a toy trailer, and we happened to have a vehicle that could pull it at Touro, and we got it. And so Cliff gave me a great deal on the toy trailer. Tony paid for it, and then we were in business, and it was so successful that, because we go down to Shade Tree, we had a partnership with Opportunity Village, Nevada Hands, going to their senior project buildings, residential buildings. We needed more. And so it became a thing that I became very intent on getting mobile clinics so my students can be out in the community. We believe in street medicine. I think it's a very important aspect of healthcare. My students may never practice in that area, but they need to know that people like that exist. And we need to provide basic health care to people to give them a fighting chance to have a decent life. And so I'm very, very proud of my students that we do that. During the pandemic, we were the first ones down at Cashman Field doing testing of the homeless. We administered 20,000 vaccines. We did swabs. When the county health district ran out of the kits, my students with faculty supervision, put the kits together. We were very actively involved in the pandemic, and I thought that also was very important, that if my med students aren't out in the field and seeing what's going on out there, because you never know when they're practicing years later, and I hope this never happens again, should it, they need to see the human suffering and the healthcare challenges that people have. They were they were food shopping for senior citizens. They were doing tutoring for the little ones that were learning virtually and having a challenge with that. And I felt that that was a very important part of their training as well. We have expanded our facilities. When Touro came to town almost 20 years ago, they bought a warehouse. And as the programs expanded, they kept building within the confines of the warehouse. So it was kind of a hodgepodge of things. I had 2 lecture halls that I had 135 med students, so a 167-seat lecture hall was terrific. When we went to 180, 167 seats, no longer terrific. So we went to the city of Henderson and we asked for an economic development bond. They granted it. We got $15 million minus all the fees, and so we have about $300,000. No, I'm kidding, a little bit more. It is a very expensive proposition to get a bond. Anyway, with that, we started building out our facility. And as Ernie said, because he came to visit us, it is breathtakingly state-of-the-art state-of-the-art, unbelievable facility now that any med student and any of our other health sciences, they get not only a quality education, which they do, and the training that they need, but they are doing it in an absolutely drop-dead gorgeous high-tech facility. Every one of my students has a handheld ultrasound machine. One of our students, when she was in class practicing, found a lump and realized that she had, well, she didn't realize at the time, she discovered a lump while she was self-examining during a class, and it turned out to be cancer. And so she's fine, she's doing beautifully, but that handheld ultrasound machine saved the life. We have an ultrasound department. We have a full-service sim center. I have a mannequin, a female mannequin that gives birth every 20 minutes. If you program her to do that, better her than me. We have applied very recently to be the first certified sim center in the state of Nevada, and I have no reason to believe that we will not be granted that request. There's a whole process that you have to go through to be certified, but we're working on that as well. And so it's just a great place to be. I have to acknowledge, because we just got it the day before yesterday, the Engelstad Foundation just gave us another $1.3 million, which we are using to renovate our old research lab, which is, the operative word is old and small and cramped, and we are building a brand new research lab, state-of-the-art. We have a wellness center that our physical therapists are using. I just took a tour of it yesterday. The most extraordinary equipment that I have ever seen, and our students are going to get a great education using these state-of-the-art pieces of equipment. So I think there's nothing but a rosy future for Touro. We are educating the next generation of healthcare providers for the state of Nevada. We're very proud of our mission. We take it very seriously. And I thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, ask me anything. What I don't know, I make up. Okay. Neville.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. You're like dynamite.
Thank you. You've been listening to me for 40 years.
But I'd like to ask you, because you never mentioned it, where do you find your teachers?
That's a very good question. We don't have a large turnover, so we have a lot of professionals that have been with us for a while. We have adjunct professors throughout the community that come and teach, my husband being one of them. I had discovered after I'd been there that Larry had been lecturing on kidneys since the school began. But we are recruiting across the country. That we are right now desperately looking for an OBGYN, and the reason that we have not started our prenatal care, even though we have a very generous grant from United Healthcare, I don't have an OBGYN to run the program. And so we are recruiting across the country for that. One other thing I didn't mention is that we are now, I stole, I'm sorry to say that, I like Rosamond very much, but when they didn't go forward with their med school when they had anticipated, they had a world-class researcher that we recruited at Touro, and he is doing extraordinary things at the school. So we are also becoming a research institution. We received our first NIH grant this past year. And we had never, we'd applied, we never qualified for anything, but I have discovered that once you have one, the chances of getting another one increase dramatically. So we will also become in not very many years, in a few years, I think a very solid research institution. Touro, California has an amazing research department with millions and millions of dollars coming in from a Science Foundation, a National Science Foundation, and the NIH. I would like to see Touro, Nevada move up to that level as well. And we just signed an MOU to collaborate with the University of Kazakhstan, which I find very fascinating. And I've actually been to Kazakhstan, so I thought that was very, very cool.
You're a regular bag lady.
Yeah, I have been referred to that way, yes.
Your medical students, are they encumbered with debt?
Oh, Ernie, thank you for mentioning that. The cost of medical school education is astronomical. The other programs are fairly handleable. You know you're going to get a job as soon as you get out of school. So after your 3 years of getting your doctorate or your PA, you start work right away at a relatively high salary. So you're able to pay back your student loans. Not so much with med school. We're touching at this moment about $60,000 a year for med school. That doesn't include anything but your tuition. Especially now that we are getting the state-of-the-art equipment, it costs money. It costs money to run a medical school. And again, I had absolutely no background in this, but I've learned budget, and we just, my fiscal year ends June 30th. So needless to say, we start putting the budget together for the next year about a month and a half ago. It is laborious. Everybody needs something, and having to make those decisions of what we can afford, what we can't afford is always a challenge. But we are a tuition-funded institution, and that's why all of the contributions that we get throughout the community have been extraordinarily helpful. One other program that I should mention because it's so good, and we received the funding from Steve Klubeck, who's an old friend of mine. After October 1, we realized that we really did not have a disaster training center in the community that could, God forbid if anything like that happened again, that we can train teachers if there's a school invasion, what to do, the healthcare aspect of it. So I read in the newspaper, this is just serendipity, read in the newspaper that the Engelstad Foundation, this is about 4 years ago, Engelstad Foundation had just given $8 million to Metro to develop a disaster training program. I called them up and I said, we can do the healthcare part of this. I'm sure you know that if you're in the middle of an active shooting situation, medical personnel cannot come to the scene. It's the police that are there, the Metro officers. If we could train them, in my head I was thinking, if we can train them during an active shooting situation and they come upon somebody that they could actually save, we can teach them to do that. So I got a hold of Metro, and actually one of the people running for sheriff was the number 2 person, and he was in charge of this, came over to the school. We agreed to do all of the disaster training for Metro when it comes to healthcare, the health part of it. We are now in the process of training all 4,000 Metro officers. So if, God forbid, anything happens and they can save a life, we will train them to be able to do that. I got a hold of Steve Klubeck. He funded it, so it's the Stephen Klubeck Disaster Training Center at Touro. The Engelstad Foundation was fully supportive of it. Metro has been great. And we have actually located our trainer, who is an employee of Touro, in the $8 million disaster training building that the Engelstad Foundation paid for Metro. So we are, working very, very closely together and very integrated to provide this part of their disaster training. So that's another program that we're very proud of.
It's a shame you weren't around when the Nevada cancer was second.
I was a big supporter of that. This is just an aside, but and I'm sure I never mentioned this to you. Every woman in my family has died of breast cancer. I have a picture of my mother. She was 19 at her engagement shower, and my 2 grandmothers were standing next to her. My great-grandmother was standing next to her daughter, who was my grandmother, and all the aunts. I come from, we're an immigrant family, so a lot of people in the family. All the aunts from one side were on one side, all the aunts on the other were on the other side, and so there's this incredible photo, and every one of those women died of breast cancer. And I've just been very lucky and very blessed. I checked every year, but I am cancer-free. But that is an important issue for me, and that's why I think when I was approached to be supportive of it, I was.
Any other questions?
Yes.
What's the percentage of your DPT program, the graduates that stay here locally?
Mostly. Other than the DOs, most of the applicants for all of our programs are locals or somewhere in the state of Nevada. We also pull from Utah, we pull from Arizona and Southern California, but not so much. But you know, we have representation for almost every state in the union, but that's where the majority of our students come from.
We've always had a shortage of therapists, and when we only had one school, about 70% of the school was out-of-state students.
Mm-hmm.
And so you are definitely filling a need there.
And such a look, when my father was dying, he looked forward. I mean, all the doctors were great, everybody treated him beautifully, but it was the PT that had the greatest impact on my dad, so I know how important they are. Yes?
Are there any non-medical courses within your curriculum, mainly towards like business related?
No.
I look at like Dr. McHale, who like runs her own private practice. She didn't have any traditional business education within your curriculum, right? She has had to learn it, like how do you do payroll, how do you staff people, how do you like? Do you guys teach any of that?
No, and we have. And by the way, Dr. McHale delivered my my grandbaby, who's now 5 months old today. I got a little text before I came in. It saved his life because he came out and it was very distressed, and so thank you. This is my little Asian Jewish grandbaby. Don't ask. Great. Terrific. I'll show you a picture when this is over. Let me answer the question. The beginning of your question, yes, we do. We have a school of education. We confer master's degrees on teachers that are already teaching in the Clark County School District and want an advanced degree. So that's another whole section of the school. One of the things lacking, and I think almost every medical school, is actually teaching these future doctors how to run an office, they are not good at it. They're very good at what they do, but not very good at the business aspect. And I think Neville will tell you, my husband is one of the few doctors that is a good businessman as well, but it just doesn't seem to be in the DNA. We have discussed doing a dual program where it's a DO and a master's in business, but we have not done that yet. And I don't know during my tenure at Touro if we will do that. But if you ask me if it would be a good idea, a very, very good idea. And maybe UNLV has the capacity to do that. I'm not sure that we do. Yes.
Shelley, you mentioned that, and I thought it was great, that you have an abundant amount of applicants so that you can be very selective of who's really suiting up, showing up, done the work to attain as students. And then the next challenge is the residency programs. And with us having 3 major hospital networks with 12 hospitals, and I believe possibly one on the way, what is the holdup, or is it that a residency program so hard to initiate? What's that juggernaut?
Well, we have been very as you, I'm sure you know, residency programs are funded from Medicare. When they started doing all the Medicare cuts, Congress started doing all the Medicare cuts, one of the first things that went was funding for residency for GME. So what ended up happening is if you had existing programs, great, they continued funding them. If you didn't have any programs, forget getting money from the feds to start one, and they're very expensive to start. And so we prevailed upon, oh, and I'll give you a little aside. This is, I don't often talk about my congressional career. I was on the Ways and Means Committee, Healthcare Subcommittee, when we were doing Obamacare. There was another woman, Allison Schwartz from Pennsylvania. Her husband was a cardiologist. My husband was a nephrologist. We knew the importance, and we were getting lobbied heavily about putting in funding for GME. Now, the idea was we were going to be providing access to affordable health care for another 30 to 40 million Americans, and no additional funding to do the training for the doctors that are supposed to see the extra 30 to 40 million. So we put in the House version of the bill funding for, through the Medicare program, to fund the expansion of graduate medical education throughout the United States. Because if you're a growth state like Nevada, I mean, your patient population's exploding, indigent population really exploding. Back then, it's different now, I'm sure the numbers, but 600,000, I think we had 2.5 million people, maybe a little bit more, population in Nevada during the Obamacare discussion and passage. 600,000 were uninsured, which means they don't, not that they don't get sick, they end up in the emergency rooms of all of our hospitals. And again, back then, there were 33 hospitals in the state of Nevada. 20 of them were running in the red. I won't say they're bankrupt, running in the red. Why is that? Uncompensated care. So we put it in, it passed in the House version. Then, as you know, the Senate passed another version of Obamacare. It was the Senate version that Obama signaled he didn't want the cost of the bill to go above $1 trillion. Oh, that makes sense, okay. 999 billion. What they did on the Senate side to get down below $1 trillion, one of the things that they cut was the graduate medical education. So when the Senate version came back to the House, and that's the one that we ultimately passed, it had no money for graduate medical education. And so we were back into this ridiculous idea that we're going to be providing affordable access to affordable health care to an extra 30, 40 million Americans. No more doctors. And so very bad policy and bad planning and bad politics as well. Anyway, we prevailed. When I got to Touro, we were working very closely with UNLV and Roseman, and we prevailed upon then Governor Brian Sandoval. He came, he toured, I'm sure he toured the other institutions as well, and we explained to him the importance of graduate medical education. We're not getting it. If we're waiting for the feds, you know, we'll all die of old age. So we needed to do it. We've got the problem here in the state. We've got to help solve it. He put in his budget $10 million over the biennium to provide startup money for GME. It has been successful. He did it the following biennium, and then Steve Sisolak included it in his budget. First time, lowered it a little during the pandemic, but we still have that funding. We'll be going, and we'll work very closely with UNLV and Roseman if they would like to participate, to ensure that this next year's budget will contain money for GME. We have to do it ourselves. The feds are not going to do it. Charles and I served in the Nevada State Legislature together, by the way.
That's my main claim to fame.
Mine as well.
I have two questions for you. One just came to my mind as you were talking about the GME. Does the GME programs, or do the GME programs qualify for federal matching?
No.
So that's out of the question there. You and I have had a conversation about this on several different occasions. We are way down in the barrel, so to speak, when it comes to compensation for physicians and medical practitioners of all kinds. Largely, I think
get no state money, none.
You're handling your funding situation very, very well, as you just explained to us. But we've got a lot of taxpayer money, particularly at UNLV and UNR, involved in producing doctors, turning out doctors from our medical school. If these folks can't make a living in the state of Nevada, and they just, they graduate from our schools and go someplace else, that seems to me like that, there's a disconnect there. We've got to keep these people here, doctors, nurses, and these types of people certainly are, they go into the field of practice that they do because they care about folks and they want to do good in their communities. But they still have to be compensated for their work. Most people don't work because it's fun. They work because it's the way they make their living. So if I could go across the street and get 50% more or 30% more or whatever, I'm probably going to go across the street. And so it just concerns me greatly that we're turning out all of these qualified, well-educated people so that they can go someplace else and go to work.
Well, yes, I could, of course. Let me mention this, and then, do you have an answer for that? Or,
More to add on to that from the perspective of the practicing physician. So you brought up Medicaid reimbursement, and yes, we do have a pretty low Medicaid reimbursement, but the unfortunate incidence here in Clark County is that we actually have private insurers that reimburse significantly less than Medicaid. Yes. Okay. There are private practice physicians who are taking 65% of Medicaid reimbursement rates as an acceptable rate from private insurers here in town. That's not feasible. That doesn't happen anywhere else in this country. And there's no bargaining power. You can just say, I'll quit taking that insurance.
Right.
That's your own choice. How do we fix that?
well,
Any doctor that wants to practice is going to make a good income in this state if they know what the hell they're doing. Bruce, do you agree with that?
Well, your comments are so correct. We have the largest insurer here in town that pays doctors less than Medicaid. We have several of the trust funds that are large that pay less than Medicaid. And Medicaid now represents 25% of all insured lives here in the state. So you are 1,000% correct.
yeah.
Just these low reimbursements by national companies who feel entitled. It's as simple as that. And the physicians, I tell physicians, don't sign up for those plans, particularly if your practice is busy, because you're filling it with low reimbursement. You can't even make a living, and you're totally correct. They don't want to talk to you. You're no longer a partner, you're a commodity. And that's how they view it.
You make the right decision, you can make a good income.
But you gotta make the right ones.
It's, look, I don't have an answer for this, but you're 100% right. But let me just say this. This is not unique to doctors. I was at the Ralston Indie Talks the other night with Superintendent Jara and some other people talking about K through 12. And John was smart enough to actually have a teacher on the panel who had been with the school district for 16 years. And I know from my own daughter-in-law who teaches 3- and 4-year-old deaf children in the Clark County School District. Good luck with that. They don't make the amount of money that we're paying teachers in this state is disgusting, disgusting. And so this is a common problem. And if you have a low tax state and nobody wants to pay taxes, you get what you pay for. Yes.
I have two things I want to ask you about. A lot of FQHCs have been popping up all over town, and they're supposed to service the Medicaid population. How come they get a higher reimbursement than
I don't have an answer for you. I'm sorry. What's your second question?
I'm just putting that out there.
Uh-huh. Oh, no, without a question. Yes, you are correct.
You know, that's just a question that I'm putting out there.
Mhm.
Why do the FQHCs get a higher reimbursement than
Mostly
private
they're
clinics?
funded by the feds, and the feds are funding
So
that.
that's one thing that I just wanted to also bring up because we're also in private practice. And number two, about the teachers from K to 12, maybe Sunny also wants to help me with this. It's been how many years? I think 6, 8 years. The Clark County School District hires teachers from the Philippines. They bring
Who come in with more
150
money than the teachers that are here. That was part of the discussion the other night.
200 teachers every year, and
Yep.
we host them when they come, welcome party.
Yeah.
Maybe Sunny, you want to talk more about that?
It's a great program, and I'm sorry for a segue to teachers, but the problem with that is there's no continuity. It's a J1 program, so they go back after 3 years. But the truth of the matter is it takes them about a year to get acclimated the way we teach. So after
And
the
then
first year, you have an acclimated teacher who's doing well from all the things that I've talked to Dr. Jarrah, I've talked to all the principals. They're very happy with his teachers. They perform.
Right.
But after 2 more years, they go back
Right.
and we start the process over.
All over again. It's
Doesn't make
ridiculous.
sense at all.
It makes no sense.
As teachers. And then I have one more. I do have a question for you. I've talked to you before about teachers for higher education, specifically on the areas, industries that we're short of, nursing, for example. Luckily, Touro doesn't have any shortage in faculty. You're doing great. You addressed that when you asked that question earlier. Unfortunately, UNLV and CSN, for example, are not. Just to give you an example, UNLV had 900 applicants for nursing students. They can only accept 300 because they don't have the faculty to do it. Why can't we mimic what they do with CCSD by recruiting teachers? Because the problem is we cannot get our own nurses to teach.
Mhm.
They make more money being a nurse than the teaching. That's the basic truth. And now our shortage of nursing is so bad,
Mhm.
we're losing nurses to other states. They're paying $125 an hour for traveling nurses. So we're going to be in trouble here.
Yes, we are.
I mean, our skilled nursing facilities are 20 to 1. When they're short, they're 30 to 1. And they're mandated by law to pass meds in 2 hours. If you do the math, they don't even, you can't even pass meds in 2 hours. It's impossible.
Another close relative of mine is an emergency room nurse in Reno, Renowned. The burnout that this woman has experienced over the last couple of years is extraordinary, extraordinary. Let me just, can I just? Oh, no, not, well, Lord knows I try, but I don't. One other important issue that you all need to know, because I'm kind of at my wit's end on this one. In addition to residency programs, which we need more of, and specific types, it doesn't matter number, it also matters the specialty, because if you want to have a specialty and we don't offer it anywhere in the state, you're going to have to go out of town so you can get your residency, your fellowship there. This is something else that has recently occurred, and especially now that we went up to 180 students. In the 3rd and 4th year of med school, first 2 years you're on campus and you're in the classroom or the lab. Last 2 years you are on rotations. These are major companies, healthcare companies, are not taking medical students. And I keep talking to them. They slow down, and we gotta, we've got to see X number of patients a day, and da 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 da. Well, I get that, I understand, but where are you getting your future workforce? I've got everything at Touro that you need, and you're not helping me with the 2 years that they've got to be out of rotations. Where are you getting your doc? Yes, it may slow somebody down. They'll see one less patient because they are helping to educate a future doctor. But in 5 years, where are you going to get your workforce from? I mean, people like my husband are in their 70s now. They're still practicing. I had dinner with Dr. Khan and Dr. Anwar and Larry. All three of them are in their 70s. Even if they're still practicing now, how many more years are they going to practice? It's like Dr. Anwar said at dinner the other night, I was planning to retire early 30 years ago. Okay, so here he is, he's still practicing. These guys are going to be gone in a few years. I need these companies, they come in, they corner the market. They've got 55, 60 clinics. They've got 300 to 400 doctors working for them, and they can't give rotations so that their workforce in the future is going to be robust. It is extremely frustrating. Yes.
Just a couple points to kind of totally appreciate what you had to say is actually, coincidentally, I was talking with Mason, CEO over at UNC yesterday, and the amount of money he gets paid for residents is so low, he loses on every
Yep.
resident.
Yep.
Then you take these national companies, they'll give you all the virtue signaling they want about it. They're here to help. It's called corporate earnings, quarterly earnings. And they're not allowed, and their bosses back at the motherland say, nice argument, but we're moving on, we need earnings. I mean, that's the issue here.
I'm not going to mention the name of the company because I'm hoping that we can resurrect this relationship. But they came to me when they came into town. Oh, we want a partnership with a med school, and your med school is so great, terrific, wonderful. And look, the beauty of Touro is my governing body is 2,000 miles away, and I suspect every institution in Nevada would prefer that to their Board of Regents right now. So I have a whole lot of flexibility and autonomy, and I could, make a deal without having to involve a bunch of people that don't know what they're talking about. So, having said that, they came to me, they wanted a partnership, To me, partnership means you're taking my students. I was asking for 30 rotations. 30? That's not a whole lot. I would go down to 20. I'll start low and go up. At the very end, we had a multi-page contract agreement. At the very end, we're just about ready to, sign on the dotted line. And they said, well, there's only one clause that we are concerned about. I said, oh, which one? So, section 5000, A2. I said, we can't give you any rotations. I said, oh, well, I understand, we have, we're just getting started and we're gonna, da-da-da-da. And I said, look, let's start small. I said, how about 5 no, I can't guarantee any. I said, would you like to tell me what your definition of partnership is? I said, you want to partner with me? Why? And since they couldn't come up with a good answer, and then the negotiations ended. It was like, look, maybe we'll revisit this in a few years, but they walked away from it because, and they were very candid. I can't say that they were saying all these altruistic things. They said, look, we have to, we can't do this because we can't get slowed down. We got to see a patient every 15 minutes or whatever. I said, where are you going to get your doctors from in a couple of years? I'm not worried about a couple of years. I'm worried about right now. I said, I'm worried about right now too, because I got to provide 180 students twice over because it's 3rd and 4th year with good rotations. And that's been a continuing challenge for us.